The air in the courthouse was different that day, as if it vibrated with an energy too potent to ignore. Every step echoed down the long marble corridors, every whispered conversation felt charged with a secret promise of change. Imagine a place where decades of silent injustice have festered behind heavy oak doors, where every gavel strike is more than just the end of a sentence, it's the closing of a chapter in a story of corruption. This was no ordinary day in the Jefferson County Courthouse. It was the moment when the relentless tide of abuse began to recede. Under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights, the courtroom was a theater of tension and anticipation. The imposing bench of Judge Miranda Lark, known for her iron-fisted rule and cold indifference, loomed over the proceedings like a relic of a bygone era, one where power was absolute and dissent was swiftly silenced. For 24 long years, her name had been synonymous with fear, her decisions unchallenged and her authority unquestioned. But on this day, a different energy pulsed through the room, a sense that something was about to shatter the status quo. In the midst of this charged atmosphere stood Marcus Reed, a defense attorney whose reputation was built on courage and unwavering commitment to justice. The rhythmic click of his polished shoes against the marble floor seemed to herald the arrival of a storm destined to uproot long-held injustice. His eyes, burning with determination, scanned the room not with the arrogance of a man who believed he was invincible, but with the quiet resolve of someone who had witnessed too many lives broken by a rigged system. Today, Marcus wasn't just another voice among the many, he was the catalyst for a change that had been decades in the making. Around him, every detail of the courthouse spoke volumes: the faded grandeur of wood-paneled walls, the silent testimony of worn, ancient benches, and the lingering scent of history and untold stories. It was here that lives had been both made and unmade, where every whispered secret and every muffled cry for justice had accumulated like dust on a forgotten shelf. The atmosphere was thick with the weight of these memories, and as Marcus took his place at the defense table, a hush fell over the room that was as tangible as the marble underfoot. Then came the moment when the routine of the day shattered into chaos. The heavy double doors swung open with a force that seemed to summon fate itself. Federal agents, clad in dark suits and bearing expressions of unwavering determination, strode into the courtroom like heralds of a new order. The room held its collective breath as the sight of these agents, symbols of accountability long absent from this hall, sent shockwaves through every soul present. It was a scene that defied expectation. The implacable judge, long untouchable, now vulnerable in the glare of the law she had so meticulously subverted. In that electrifying moment, with cameras flashing and hearts pounding in unison, one question began to form in the minds of every onlooker: could this be the day that the entrenched corruption was finally exposed? Was this the spark that would ignite a revolution within the very institution meant to protect justice? As whispers of anticipation filled the air, the stage was set for a confrontation that would not only redefine the fate of one man on trial but also challenge the foundations of a system built on decades of unchecked power. And so, as the first notes of an unfolding battle resonated through the chamber, the courthouse was transformed from a relic of oppression into a crucible for truth, a place where the relentless pursuit of justice would rise, challenging every preconception and daring every observer to believe in the possibility of change. The rise and fall of Judge Miranda Lark. For 24 long years, the austere halls of the Jefferson County Courthouse in Birmingham, Alabama, had been the stage for a dark drama. At the center of that drama sat Judge Miranda Lark, a figure both feared and revered. Behind her calm, measured tone and the glint of authority in her eyes, lay decades of bias and injustice that had quietly tormented countless lives. Her courtroom was her kingdom, a realm where dissent was smothered with a mere tilt of her head, and where the fates of those who dared to question her were sealed with a single word. Every inch of the courthouse exuded an atmosphere of oppressive tradition. Heavy oak doors, worn smooth by years of use, guarded the entrance. Inside, marble floors gleamed under the unforgiving light, and every corridor echoed with the soft steps of those who had learned to tread carefully in a place where power was absolute. Attorneys entered with a sense of foreboding, knowing that the moment they crossed the threshold into Judge Lark's chamber, they were stepping into a world where justice was manipulated to favor the powerful. On one seemingly ordinary morning, Marcus Reed, a defense attorney known for his unwavering commitment to fairness and his reputation for taking on the cases no one else would, stepped into this intimidating arena. Every step he took was deliberate. The click of his polished shoes on the marble floor was like a steady drumbeat heralding a battle years in the making. Marcus had built his career representing the forgotten and the wronged, taking on cases where hope had long been extinguished by systemic prejudice. But today was different. Today, everything was about to change. Sitting quietly beside Marcus was his client, Cameron Ellis, a man wrongfully accused of armed robbery. Cameron's posture spoke of a lifetime spent crushed under the weight of injustice. His eyes, tired and resigned, had seen too many battles lost in a rigged system. Each line on his face, each hesitant breath, told a story of endless waiting and unfulfilled promises of justice. As Marcus took his place at the defense table, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew heavy with anticipation. Every witness in the gallery, every reporter with their camera poised, sensed that this trial was not like any other. It was a turning point, a moment, and the silence of decades would finally be broken. Judge Miranda Lark presided over the proceedings with the detached authority she was known for. Seated high upon her bench, her eyes remained fixed on a mountain of documents. Without glancing directly at Marcus, she spoke in a low, measured tone that left no room for debate. "Mr. Reed, you are already treading on thin ice in this courtroom. Do not waste my time with unnecessary theatrics." Her words, delivered with the calm precision of someone accustomed to absolute power, cut through the tension like a knife. Marcus, however, remained unflinching. "Your Honor, I stand before you not only to defend my client but to ensure that every injustice is exposed for what it is," he replied evenly, his voice carrying the quiet resolve of a man who had long prepared for this day. The trial began, and from the very start, it was evident that this was not merely a case of proving innocence. It was a performance, a staged event where every objection, every motion, was predetermined. The proceedings unfolded in a rhythm dictated solely by Judge Lark. Every time Marcus raised a concern about evidence or procedure, it was met with swift dismissal. Every attempt by the prosecution to steer the narrative was quashed with a curt "move on." It was as if the outcome had been decided long before the first witness took the stand. Across the courtroom, Logan Pierce, a young and ambitious assistant district attorney, stood at the ready. His bright eyes and confident smile did little to hide the fact that he was a pawn in a system that favored those with power. "The state is ready," he declared, his voice firm yet betraying a hint of uncertainty beneath the surface. His words echoed in the chamber, further underscoring the imbalance that had become routine in Judge Lark's court. As the trial advanced, Marcus Reed began to peel back the layers of injustice that had long been hidden beneath the surface. The tension was palpable as he called a key witness to the stand, a nervous store clerk named Oliver Grant. Oliver's hands trembled as he took the witness stand, and his wide eyes darted about the room, as if searching for an escape. Marcus leaned forward, his gaze intent and unwavering. "Mr. Grant, you mentioned that you think you saw my client that night. How certain are you of what you witnessed?" he asked, his voice soft yet insistent. At that precise moment, the camera would capture a close-up of Oliver's face, the bead of sweat rolling down his temple, his lips parting in a silent plea for clarity. But before Oliver could muster a clear answer, Judge Lark interrupted sharply, "Move on." Her command was final, silencing not only the witness but also the hope for a more honest account of the events. The abrupt dismissal left the courtroom buzzing with murmurs and uncertainty. Every gesture, every nuance of Judge Lark's demeanor began to reveal the deep-seated corruption that had enabled her to manipulate justice for so long. Marcus observed the slight darkening of her eyes when confronted with facts that contradicted her narrative. He noted the barely perceptible tremor in her hand as she gripped the edge of her bench, a hand that had once delivered decisions with unyielding authority now betrayed its own vulnerability. These small details, meticulously observed, were the seeds of her downfall. Then, as if heralding a long-awaited climax, the massive double doors of the courtroom swung open with a resounding crash. The sudden intrusion of two federal agents, dressed immaculately in dark suits, stunned everyone into silence. Their entrance was nothing short of cinematic, the camera capturing every determined step they took, their faces set in expressions of unwavering resolve. The agents moved with purpose, their presence a visual declaration that the era of unchecked power was coming to an end. One agent, a tall and imposing figure, stepped forward and held his badge aloft. "Judge Miranda Lark, you are required to accompany us immediately for further questioning," he announced firmly. At that moment, the camera would have focused on Judge Lark's face, capturing the first visible crack in her otherwise impassive mask, a flash of panic, a tremble in her eyes, and the slight quiver of her hand. "I am in the middle of a trial," she protested, her voice a mixture of indignation and disbelief. But the agent's tone brooked no argument. "This matter is of federal concern," he stated, his words echoing in the silent chamber and resonating with an unyielding authority that silenced all dissent. The impact of that declaration rippled through the courtroom like a shockwave. Reporters began scribbling furiously in their notepads, and the gallery's collective breath caught in their throats. Even Logan Pierce, who had so confidently represented the state, now appeared shaken, his earlier bravado replaced by a look of stark realization. In the midst of this unfolding drama, Marcus Reed rose slowly from his seat. Each step he took toward the center of the courtroom was deliberate, captured by the cameras as a symbol of his unbreakable resolve. His eyes, steady and clear, locked onto Judge Lark's for one final moment, a silent, defiant challenge that spoke volumes more than any words ever could. "With all due respect, Your Honor," Marcus began, his voice steady yet laced with the weight of years spent battling injustice, "today is no longer solely about the fate of my client. It is about exposing the deep-seated corruption that has poisoned this courtroom for far too long." His words rang out, filling the space with an undeniable urgency that could not be ignored. At that critical juncture, the lead federal agent produced a neatly folded document and read aloud in a measured tone, "Judge Miranda Lark, you are hereby under arrest on charges of bribery, abuse of power, obstruction of justice, and violations of civil rights under federal law." The words fell like a hammer, shattering the illusion of invincibility that had surrounded Judge Lark for decades. Close-ups captured every moment, the stunned expressions of the jurors, the shocked whispers in the gallery, and, most strikingly, the trembling of Judge Lark's hand as the first cuff was snapped around her wrist. In an instant, the once imposing figure of Judge Lark was reduced to a symbol of fallen authority. Her voice, which had commanded the courtroom with relentless precision, now cracked as she muttered, "This is outrageous." Her protest was cut short by the steely tone of the federal agent, "You have the right to remain silent." The courtroom erupted into a tumult of gasps, murmurs, and the rapid clicking of cameras capturing history in motion. Every person in the room, attorneys, jurors, reporters, and onlookers alike, realized that the long era of injustice was coming to an abrupt end. Marcus Reed, standing resolutely amid the chaos, addressed the room with quiet determination. "I have always respected the law even when it has failed the innocent," he stated, his voice both tender and commanding. Today, justice is not merely an ideal, it is a reality for every individual who has been silenced by corruption. His declaration resonated powerfully, striking a chord not only with those present but also with every viewer watching this moment unfold. As Judge Lark was escorted from the courtroom in handcuffs, a palpable shift occurred in the atmosphere. The oppressive weight of injustice began to lift, replaced by a cautious hope. Cameron Ellis, who had long suffered under the weight of false accusations, sat in stunned silence. His eyes, once dull with resignation, now sparkled with the first flickers of hope. The cameras captured every nuanced reaction, the gradual easing of tension in his face, the slight lift in his posture, as if the chains of a rigged system were finally breaking. Across the courtroom, Logan Pierce's earlier confidence had evaporated. His hands trembled as he clutched his briefs, his face draining of color as the reality of the situation sank in. The very foundation of the corrupt system he had once believed in was crumbling before his eyes. Meanwhile, the federal agent's presence and the resolute tone of Marcus Reed turned the courtroom into a battleground for accountability, a place where the truth, long suppressed, was finally allowed to surface. Following the dramatic exit of Judge Lark, the attention of the courtroom shifted to a new figure, a replacement judge renowned for his fairness and commitment to the law. An older African-American man with a presence both dignified and compassionate, Judge Terrence Caldwell took his seat. With measured authority, he regarded the proceedings with a clarity born of years spent upholding justice. Marcus Reed turned to him and the assembled crowd, his voice steady and imbued with quiet urgency. Given the events of today, I move for the immediate dismissal of all charges against my client, Cameron Ellis. This trial has been contaminated by bias and manipulation from the very start, as demonstrated by Judge Lark's actions. After a heavy silence that seemed to stretch for an eternity, Judge Caldwell nodded solemnly. "I concur," he pronounced in a measured tone. Then, with deliberate calm, he addressed the bailiff, "Remove the restraints from Mr. Ellis immediately." In that defining moment, as the handcuffs clicked open and fell to the floor, the camera captured a tearful yet triumphant expression on Cameron's face, a visual metaphor for the liberation of a man who had long been denied justice. But Marcus Reed knew that the victory of the day, as profound as it was, marked only the beginning of a much larger battle. Even as the courtroom slowly regained its composure, a quiet energy filled the space, a collective resolve to never again allow corruption to go unchecked. Standing before the now silent gallery and the millions watching on YouTube, Marcus spoke directly into the camera, his words resonating with a call to action. "Today, we have witnessed the collapse of a system built on lies and injustice. But this victory is not just mine, it belongs to every person who has ever felt the sting of an unjust verdict, to every voice that was silenced by the weight of corruption. The fight for true justice continues, and it begins with each of you." In a series of carefully chosen shots that underscored the gravity of the moment, the camera panned over the empty judge's bench, a stark reminder of a fallen era. It lingered on the spot where Judge Lark had once commanded unquestioned obedience, and then it captured a close-up of Marcus Reed's determined gaze, a look that challenged every viewer to reflect on their own role in the fight for justice. As the day drew to a close and Judge Caldwell formally dismissed all charges against Cameron Ellis, the courtroom's energy transformed into an enduring call for change. Marcus Reed, still standing at the defense table, addressed the audience one final time. "We have seen today that when power is abused, the truth will eventually find a way to shine through the darkness. Justice is not a privilege bestowed upon the few, it is a right for every human being. I ask you now, what do you think compelled me to rise up in that pivotal moment? Have you ever witnessed an injustice so profound that it stirred you to action? And if you were in Cameron Ellis's place, facing a system stacked against you, how would you fight for your freedom? His words were punctuated by a series of evocative images, the slow closing of the courthouse doors behind which Judge Lark S. reign had ended, the hopeful, glistening eyes of Cameron Ellis as he tasted freedom at last, and the resolute expression on Marcus Reed's face, a beacon for every person yearning for justice. As we leave this day behind, Marcus continued, his tone both challenging and compassionate, remember that real change begins with each of us. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Tell me, what injustice have you witnessed? What would you do if you saw corruption unchecked? Your voice matters. It is the spark that can ignite a revolution in our broken system. Will you stand with us and be the change that transforms injustice into accountability? The final moments of this extraordinary day were etched in every memory, captured by countless cameras and shared by millions across the nation. The story of Judge Miranda Lark's downfall was not just a tale of one courtroom, it was a clarion call for justice, a reminder that no matter how deeply corruption is rooted, truth and courage will always prevail. In the aftermath of the historic trial, as the courthouse began to empty and the echoes of this landmark day lingered in every corridor, the impact of what had transpired continued to reverberate. Marcus Reed's powerful words and unwavering determination had shown that the fight for justice is an ongoing journey, a journey that each of us must be willing to take, even when the odds seem insurmountable. So, as you watch this story unfold, ask yourself, what do you believe truly drove Marcus Reed to risk everything and challenge a system built on decades of bias? Have you ever been moved to act by witnessing an injustice? And if you were forced to stand in the shoes of Cameron Ellis, how would you reclaim your freedom in a world that often seems determined to keep you silenced? Your thoughts, your experiences, and your passion for change are vital in this ongoing struggle. Share your stories in the comments below and join us in building a future where justice is not a distant dream but a reality for every one of us. The battle is not over, it has only just begun. What steps will you take to ensure that our justice system never again tolerates corruption? The power to change the world is in your hands. In the aftermath of that fateful day, when the mighty walls of the courthouse bore witness to the collapse of an era defined by unchecked power, a palpable silence descended over the chamber, a silence that spoke of both heartbreak and hope. The echoes of gavel strikes, once symbols of a relentless regime, now resonated like distant memories of a system finally held accountable. As the courtroom emptied and the heavy doors closed behind those who had long abused the scales of justice, a new beginning began to take shape, a dawn that promised transformation and healing, yet left behind mysteries that beckoned for further inquiry. For many, that historic moment was more than just the downfall of a corrupt judge, it was a reckoning, a reminder that even the most entrenched power can be challenged when courage meets conviction. Marcus Reed's unwavering stance, a beacon of defiance in a sea of conformity, stirred something deep within the hearts of every person who had ever felt silenced by injustice. His determination to expose the truth, even at great personal cost, became the spark that ignited a wildfire of change, reminding us that the law is meant to serve the people, not oppress them. As you reflect on the dramatic events that unfolded, consider the lessons etched into every corner of that storied courtroom. The fall of Judge Miranda Lark was not merely the result of relentless legal maneuvers or the timely intervention of federal agents, it was the culmination of decades of quiet suffering and the unyielding demand for accountability. It teaches us that no matter how impervious a facade of authority might seem, truth has a way of breaking through the cracks. Every injustice, no matter how deeply buried, leaves traces that can never be completely erased. And it is those traces, each whispered complaint, every suppressed cry for help, that eventually coalesce into a force powerful enough to topple even the most oppressive regimes. Yet, with every conclusion comes new questions. As the dust settled on that historic day, many were left to wonder, what will be the lasting impact of this monumental shift? How many more barriers must fall before our institutions are truly reformed? And most importantly, what part will each of us play in the journey towards a fairer, more accountable system? These are not questions with easy answers, but they are questions that demand our attention if we are to learn from the past and build a future where justice is not a privilege of the few but a right for all. Imagine the haunting images of that day, the trembling hand of Judge Lark as the cold metal of the handcuffs locked around her wrist, the resolute gaze of Marcus Reed as he met the eyes of every witness, and the quiet, almost imperceptible change in the expression of Cameron Ellis as the chains of injustice were finally broken. These images remind us that change is not always loud or immediate. Sometimes, it comes in quiet, decisive moments that ripple outwards, altering lives and shaping the destiny of entire communities. Now, as we stand at the crossroads of history and possibility, we must ask ourselves, how will this transformative moment redefine our understanding of justice? Will the courage of those who dared to stand against corruption inspire others to do the same? And if one man's act of defiance can bring down a symbol of oppression, what could a united community of voices achieve? The questions linger, inviting us to reflect, debate, and ultimately, act. The story of that day is not yet over. In fact, it is only the beginning of a larger narrative that continues to unfold with every act of resistance and every call for reform. We are left with a mystery, a puzzle of change that beckons us to look deeper into the systems we once trusted without question. It challenges us to consider, what hidden injustices lie beneath the surface of our daily lives? How many more Larks are there in our midst, operating in the shadows, and waiting for the moment when their reign can be brought to an end? As you ponder these questions, think about your own role in the ongoing struggle for justice. Have you ever witnessed a moment of injustice that stirred you to action? What would you do if you found yourself trapped in a system that favored power over truth? The legacy of that day is not confined to the walls of a courthouse. It lives on in the hearts of those who demand accountability and in the quiet determination of every individual willing to stand up for what is right. So, as we close this chapter and look to the future, let this story serve as both a reminder and a challenge. A reminder that no injustice is ever truly forgotten, and a challenge to each of us, to be the catalyst for change in our own communities. What will you do with the knowledge that power can be reclaimed, that corruption can be exposed, and that the fight for justice is an unending journey? The dawn of a new era is upon us, and the next step is in your hands. Will you join the movement? Will you be the voice that dares to question, the light that pierces the darkness, and the force that transforms our world for the better? The story has been written, but its ending, and your part in it, remains to be decided.